Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker, joined by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkren, for our big Matchday 3 preview. St. Louis City, Seattle Sounders. Stu, the hat poses a problem because the STLFC colors are sort of Sounders colors, but I'll let it slide. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, and yeah, there definitely is some overlap in colors there, and I think there's probably an overlap a little bit with old school MLS fans in St. Louis, and maybe having some Seattle, Portland. Those were the hot teams to cheer for in the early 2010s. So I don't know. Maybe we'll have some people who have some mixed feelings on this match.
Oh man, this is what I get for having a crazy busy day before we live stream. Is we are not live on X because of an issue that I'm trying to fix as we're streaming, and that's usually never a good idea. But Stu, before we actually start the pod recording, how you feeling about this City team?
Oh man, it's still very much an unknown. It feels like DeMay, I think, has done enough to kindle some optimism. The roster's, not looking shabby. Tweak a few things here and there. You can definitely see that there's progress and potential.
Is the potential gonna present itself soon enough? We think.
Oh
this
man,
is like the 50,000-foot view when we're gonna dive into it here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're an MLS team playing at home, you should always have a better than not chance at winning. So just from that perspective, I think Saturday's reason to be at least a little optimistic.
I don't think I'm going to mention it on the pod recording, but I did see a stat today that said through the first 2 games of the season, home field advantage has meant more than in the history of the league. Like more teams have, I think, taken points from home matches in the first 2 games than ever before, which is kind of a wild stat considering that in general, MLS is one of the most difficult leagues to play away in. And so to have that magnified with the obvious unfortunate stat of us not getting a win yet at home. So I don't know. It's not that the pressure's on to perform up to that stat. It's just interesting that for some reason this year home field advantages seems to matter even more, bizarrely enough.
Yeah, well, there is one team in MLS who has 2 home losses. Who is that? Is that Rapids?
Well, they have 1 home loss to Seattle, I believe.
Yeah, they might be both of them. There's only 4 home losses in the league so far this year, which is pretty crazy.
Thankfully, we didn't have a home loss, even though we couldn't take all 3 points against Charlotte.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully not to be included in that infamous crew of 3 teams, I guess.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to do that. Okay, fix the issue. Now it's time to start the pod recording. Stu, you ready to roll?
Yeah, we already got some chat going on.
We do. Welcome in, everyone, to Flyover Footy. Presented in part, at least, by Blue Jay Brewing. Enjoying a little high five to start the show because it's been that kind of a week. Stu and I were commiserating about work, personal life things throughout the week, and we're ready to talk City soccer. That's what we want to do. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. We're happy to get to them. Thank you for joining the chat, first of all. It's awesome to see everybody on a Thursday. Everybody's kind of fired up a little bit, I think. The weather is somewhat nicer. The rain has been hit or miss all week. So I'm excited to get back to Energizer Park amongst friends and what should be a fairly clear game. I'm pretty sure that the rain's supposed to stop before 6 or 7 p.m. on Saturday. But whether you want to ride the high of the game upcoming, ride the high of St. Louis University basketball, we're welcoming all the ups that we can take because the vibes should be high. Let's elevate that a little bit. You ready to do this, Stu?
Absolutely. And as it was mentioned in the chat, if I don't know if it was part of the recording or off the recording, the 2 home losses were Orlando had 2 home losses. So thanks, Drake and others who pointed that out.
And it's against Miami most recently, which devastating for them. Up 2-0 at half, and they blow it. Oof.
Yeah, 4-2 final.
Ugly, ugly. All right, let's focus on St. Louis and let's get into it. Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. My name is Matt Baker. Thank you so much for joining us on this Matchday 3 preview. There's a lot of alliteration going on there. And to do this, I am joined by my friend in soccer, Stuart Holkgren, to break it all down. Stu, how you doing in this lead up to the Seattle Sounders game?
I'm doing good. This wonderful rainy St. Louis weather is making it easy to find some other things to be thankful for and to look forward to and be happy about. And right now, that is our wonderful MLS team and some absolutely gorgeous scarves, limited edition scarves for Match Day 3.
Does this mean that we're retiring the toasted ravioli theme? We're moving on. Is this another one of those things where St. Louis has done it for like 3 years and then we're moving to a new phase? Because we've heard this a few times in the season ticket member gift. I think Pete Woods mentioned it a couple other places, but this next era of St. Louis is shifting up 314 Day, because this Saturday at Energizer is St. Louis Day celebration. And so St. Louis has released new merchandise naturally to fit that. But I haven't seen a single negative thing about this scarf. If you haven't seen this scarf that St. Louis is releasing for STL or St. Louis Day, 314 Day, however you want to refer to it as, my goodness, you got to check it out. It's got a full city flag on one side, meet me in St. Louis on the other side. Absolutely gorgeous. Can't wait to pick one up. And I think they're doing, if they're getting away from the toasted raviolis, then I'm okay with them jumping into this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a toasted raviolis fan, so I like that merch and leaned into it. If they're moving on, maybe it's a good time to do that. You can't complain about the scarf.
No, absolutely not. We are forever bandwagon fans, not bandwagon, but forever fans of the St. Louis flag. The city of St. Louis flag is one of the most gorgeous. It is the most gorgeous city flag in the entire world. It's won competitions, and now we get to have it as part of our actual city scarf. Love it. It's going to be amazing. You know what else was announced this week that could be amazing, Stu? The MLS All-Star Game. And that is my cheesy segue into basically the one news of the week that I clocked that is at least worthwhile in mentioning on the pod recording and on the Big 550 is the MLS All-Star Game was announced to be played in July in Charlotte. It's another iteration of MLS League MX, but this version of it could be the last version of the All-Star Game as we know it. It will be held at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, California. Or I'm sorry, Charlotte, California. My goodness, Charlotte, North Carolina. But the question to me, Stu, isn't, how good would the All-Star Game be? It's what comes next, because Charlotte, as the team that entered Major League Soccer before St. Louis, does this clear the way for St. Louis to get the 2027 All-Star Game? Will there be a 2027 All-Star Game? We have that sprint season. We have a gap in the summer, and then we shift the calendar. So there are lots of questions. Nothing's guaranteed to St. Louis. A, you need an All-Star Game. B, when will the All-Star Game be in 2027? And C, does St. Louis get it? Is it our turn? I noticed that at least TQL Stadium in Cincinnati hasn't had one. Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego obviously hasn't had one. So this isn't as perfect of a situation as I would have hoped for St. Louis to be the no-brainer open goal type selection. Do you think we get, and I'm looking past 26 at this point, do you think we get an All-Star Game in its current form in 27?
I think a lot of that depends on when the game's going to be and how attractive we are, what time of the year. Are we doing this leading up to the fall 2027, 2028, really that first new schedule season? If you're doing that in July, weather in St. Louis is pretty good. I don't know who that limits your opponent to. If you want to do Liga MX again, that would be a logical time to do it. If you do it in December, I mean, let's be honest, San Diego has more appealing weather for an event like that than St. Louis does in December. December 15th, say, sometime around then in the month. But if it is in December, the appeal for that to MLS is, do they go back to like a Bayern or traveling international teams? Are they really sticking with Mexico? Because it seems like with Leagues Cup, they already have enough of that connection between the leagues. But
yeah,
are they going to keep that? Who knows?
And to me, the time of year is the biggest question. I can't see St. Louis getting it if it's going to be in December or February. There's just it's almost like a Super Bowl conversation where it's just too much of a risk for terrible weather that harms the players, kind of a thing. But I personally would rather it be a preseason friendly type of a thing. Maybe select all-stars from the prior season for the sprint season. Maybe all-stars from the full season then can play in this preseason friendly. I don't know, or postseason friendly right after the playoffs, something along that time frame. I think I would enjoy more because you're just going to have a host of issues if you do it in the winter, where a lot of teams won't have the opportunity to host going forward. It's small potatoes kind of thing, but I'm closely following how that will turn out and what gets announced on All-Star Weekend this year in July.
Yeah, something interesting. I just pulled up the collective bargaining agreement right now that goes from 2020 to 2028. And section 25.1, this is fascinating podcast listening right now.
I love it.
Talks about the All-Star game. It's free to pull this up if anyone wants to read it. Not a lawyer, but it does say elects to hold an All-Star game during the MLS season, not after or before. So I don't know if that matters at all, but it does say that MLS has the ability to elect it. So it's not required by the CBA to happen.
Stuart Holgren, not a lawyer, just plays one on Flyover Footy. Appreciate you for bringing the bylaws of the CBA into it. We haven't had a CBA discussion in quite some time, and I'm impressed that you're the one to be called that lawyer diving into the rules of the road, so to speak. What I'll do is pivot the topic over to our Matchday 3 preview against the Seattle Sounders. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, and this is a team that St. Louis has perennially struggled against. So as we look to this weekend in Seattle Sounders coming to Energizer Park, it's ironic that the one win out of 6 matches came last year as one of the 2 matches we won under Olaf Melberg. The irony is thick with this one. 5 losses against Seattle in 6 games. The only win was that last 1-0 win against Seattle on March 15th. From an Edu Leuven free kick. So it's not like we were successful in the run of play, and we never really have been. Seattle's always had our number. We hope that this new look St. Louis City can outlast, outmatch, and outwit I would say, slightly upgraded Seattle 1.5 from last season. As we'll talk about, they're basically the same Seattle team as far as how they play on the ball, but they press a lot more. They're a lot more aggressive. They stretch the field. They're creative in those ways, but they are banged up. And we will talk about that in just a minute because I think Stu and I both have some things to bring to that conversation. Before we look at Seattle, let's take a pretty good look at St. Louis coming into this one. St. Louis, you hate to look at early on in what the standings are early in the season, but we're tied for 14th in the West. It's only notable to me because we are one of 2 Western Conference teams to not have a win after 2 weeks. Santi and I talked about it on Fallout that this is a pretty good, strong Western Conference so far this season through 2 weeks. St. Louis, unfortunately, hasn't joined that party yet. -2 goal differential, 1 goal scored, 2 goals against through the 1-1 draw against Charlotte and the 2-0 loss against San Diego. Some of the trends for St. Louis, they've been really tough to figure out. In the first week, we were winning possession. We didn't have many shots allowed. We had a lot of shots on target for us. We were winning battles where we needed to win them. We were progressing successfully through the wings. Rafael Santos had a quality game. Conrad Wallem was producing. We had build-up that leveraged our midfielders that assisted the wingers, and it was working. It was structured, and we had a lot more final third entries. We won the field tilt battle, but we couldn't quite find that go-ahead goal. It never materialized even late in the game. And then in week 2, it was almost a complete reversal of every positive thing that we saw. San Diego had us trapped, stymied, could not progress the ball. 90% of the time in this match, we were still trying to progress it down our wings. But whether it was Dante Polvera or Haziel Orozco as the primary progressors, nothing was working. And it ended up having Santos subbed out at halftime. Just things fell apart against San Diego. We stuck to our guns, but we were just very ineffective. So I asked Yohan Demay on Thursday's press conference about ball progression in those first 2 games, where he can draw some correlation. So let's hear from Yoann Damet on the ball progression for St. Louis and his approach playing on the ball.
I think it's interesting. Like you're dealing with two different games. Like one where there is maybe more pressure than the other one. So like the progression is a little bit different. Like the way we've used the side was a little bit different. I'd say like the common theme for me is more decision making, like under pressure. Being able to understand moments where we need to attack and we need to try to unbalance, and maybe moments where we can retain possession and change angle and like recycle and start switching the play a little bit more. So we're trying to get to that understanding with the players. It's a matter of feeling and recognizing those moments. I think every time we had like a little bit more control of the ball against San Diego, we were dangerous. We also had some good moments in transition, I thought, but like now it's finding the balance between like not transitioning all the time, not attacking fast all the time, or not attacking like with more passes or like slower all the time either. So how do we find a balance? It starts with like having a common understanding of like what we want to do and when do we want to attack. So I think it's definitely something that is interesting to coach and to be on the same page on, because like it's a matter of a feeling and every player are different. You've got guys that like those situations of 1v1, 2v1, and they want to go every time. And there is some other guys that maybe have like a better feeling of like, hey, let's keep the ball. We've been like spending like a little bit of time trying to get it back. Now it's time to regain the dynamic of the game, regain a little bit of momentum, and find a better moment to attack.
So Stu, what do we think about St. Louis's attempt to find balance here? How successful do you think St. Louis can be after what we saw against San Jose, and overall just seeing St. Louis under Damet these first couple of weeks? What's the big takeaway?
Oh man, I think we're also still figuring out how good our opponents are to some extent. Not to we sang the praises of Charlotte from the hilltop during our live show, and either we were much more impressive than expected, or they were much more mediocre than expected.
Yeah.
And the follow-up match against LA Galaxy, where they absolutely got thrashed in LA, might be a sign that they're more mediocre than expected. But I don't know. We'll see. Even in that San Diego match, even though it never felt like we were going to win that one, you could see moments where there was something being built upon, some level to hope. Whereas against or under rather Olaf last year, there were matches in which there was nothing. There was just absolutely no hope that we were building or progressing something for the future. And you can take losses or near wins or draws or whatever, heartbreak, as long as you can see some hope at the end of the tunnel. So hearing Damet in the press conferences, hearing just the way he conducts himself is really a breath of fresh air.
And he's got the players bought in. Roman Berkey talked about how the coaching staff is doing so much more and taking such a load off of the players and him as a leader this year than ever before. And so there's a level of comfortability in what Berkey's able to do and focus on himself and the players and not get too outside of himself as the leader of the team. That's credit to Damet. And the thing that I saw a couple times throughout the week is the comment of, why didn't Yoann Damet change things up even more? Why didn't we drop back into a low block? Why didn't we drop more players back off the ball and get a little less aggressive on our press, knowing that we were beat a couple times? And those are valid questions, but with it just being week 2, I do have to give credit for the fact that we didn't abandon our style, our system, our desire of how we're playing. We tried to fight through it. To borrow what Damet said last week, we suffered against San Diego, but we kept our identity, we kept our shape, we kept our confidence, and we kept the principles that Damet has been instilling in this team for about 8 weeks now. So yes, a short-term sacrifice kind of for a long-term gain, because you don't want to lose all of that momentum that you've been building. You don't want to have to change the way the players are reacting initially. You don't want to change the direction that they're receiving, so that it would be they would be at a disadvantage in the next couple of weeks. And so we got through San Diego, but unfortunately we're kind of more banged up in the process. It's a really mixed bag on what this player availability is going to be this weekend. First and foremost, Falufal and Tomas Ostrak are going to still be out. Both were said by DeMay to be at the end of their plan from preseason in return to play. So knowing that they're running to the side of training right now, they're going to get integrated back into the team. They're gaining fitness as they're working solo right now, doing a lot of sprints, a lot of running, cardio work. And so DeMay hopes that when they are able to reintegrate them shortly, he didn't specify the timeline, next week, week after, that it won't take long for them to get back to some level of match fitness, both Falufal and Tomas Ostrak. The really bad news of the week is Thomas Totland. Thomas Totland is out, quote, for a little bit. DeMay said that for now he's in assessment mode and they're looking at the plan for the coming weeks. The team has said it's an abdominal injury that he suffered against San Diego last week. An abdominal injury could mean a lot of things. It could mean groin. It could mean hernia. There's a lot of things that are tied to the abdominal area muscular wise. And so that is absolutely concerning because it takes our wing back depth and it puts it on a razor's edge, not unlike what our midfield is at right now without Leuven and Ostrak. Tyson Pierce, Caden Glover, both still out. Edu Leuven was not training this week, absent and likely, we think, to miss this coming week. Our thoughts and prayers with the Leuven family. On the good side, though, because there are some positives and they are in the form of newer players. Sergio Cordova began training this week on Wednesday. It was the first day of training for the team. Continued training successfully on Thursday. He's progressing. Johan DeMay says he's fully fit and, quote, he's ready. Now, the thing about Cordova is obviously just arriving, only had 2 sessions so far. Team's still assessing him. Striker is an interesting position on how you're going to throw in there sooner rather than later, as far as what the responsibilities are of the striker in helping to initiate the press, and how the instincts and the experience of a Sergio Cordova will play into what the team trusts him to do in conjunction with the full team. I'm probably still erring on the side of this is a Simon Betcher start, but it will be interesting to see how Cordova is prioritized with some other players like Brendan McSorley, and is it an immediate relief for Simon Betcher at some point? Mamadou Mbake is the other player who we expect to either start or make an appearance. He didn't make an appearance last week. DeMay was talking in the press conference on Thursday about the decisions late in a game, especially having more to do with the team needs, who was going in where at what point. The Totland injury threw things into a little bit of chaos for what the plan was. But DeMay said it was basically alluding to the fact that he's not approaching a player like Mbake late in a game as we need to get him minutes, so we're going to force him into that. It's a team-based approach, what the team needs. And if the team didn't need Mbake at that moment, then, down 2 goals already and trying to fight for an attack, if they didn't need to spend a sub on a center back at that point, they weren't going to. And so that played into a lot of why we didn't see Mbake last week. But there's no reason initially right now on whether or not we'll see him this coming week. I hope we do, because I'm excited to see how he fits into that back line. Probably you would assume in place of Haziel Orozco on the right. But, we're starting to get into the sense of adding some players. And so how does this depth chart really shake out on the back line, especially? And Stu, that takes me into the first of the storylines for City that I'm following in this, and it's Dante Polvera. Dante Polvera had a rough outing against San Diego. You could argue that both goals were partially attributed to him. However, I think I have plenty more folks to blame for the first goal that was in transition, where our midfield was just absolutely crushed and we had a 5-on-4 against us. Polvera made some interesting choices in stepping up on the second goal, missing both Anders Dreyer and the ball in the process and taking himself out of the play. So his evolution at center back it might not be the biggest storyline for me to follow, but after his performance against San Diego and against a team like Seattle that has a strong attacking nucleus in Albert Rusnak and Jesus Ferreira and others, Polvera is a player to watch for me. How confident are you right now in Dante Polvera remaining in the starting lineup as he's going through this evolution at center back, knowing that we have a McNaughton and an Mbake on the way?
How confident? I mean, gosh, I think it's going to take time. I mean, he's learning the position. Obviously he's had room for improvement, and McNaughton has the pedigree. He's been a good MLS center back in the past. So I could see DeMay dropping Polvera. I don't see it right now, But the thing is, Pulver is not slotted to be our nailed on center back in that role. I mean, you'd think Falu Fall, once he's come back and he's fit, will slot into that position.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're expecting our third choice center back to hold up for a few games, I'm somewhat confident with Polvera back there. With Polvera back there with Timo to his right does give me a little bit of cause for concern.
The spacing is the biggest issue for me. But in general, my second storyline for City to follow for this coming week is how our shape is going to look after an up and down first 2 weeks. I fully expect us to not change our tactics and our approach, but even though we didn't change it from weeks 1 and 2, our shape was pretty different. It suffered. We weren't able to get as wide as we were in week 1. A lot of our progressive passes came shorter lengths. We weren't able to get near the amount of pressure in the attacking half, let alone the final third. And so it was almost like a broken version of us. So against this Seattle team that does like to press and will like to have possession, how will our shape and our structure successfully hold? This is a team that is more similar to San Diego, I think. And so that's a big concern for me right off the bat, is knowing how we perform against San Diego, a similar, and I'll get DeMay's quote here in just a little bit when we talk more about Seattle, but a similar team is cause for concern. Stu, I want to get your thoughts on Simon Betcher as our striker. With Sergio Cordova just arriving this week, I guess there's a lot of questions. Is Cordova ready? Should we make the move yet? Should consistency win out? Does Betcher deserve more time? And how short may the leash be?
I mean, I think he still has some length on his leash right now. If for no other reason, I don't like the idea of throwing Cordova out there without being fully match fit, being tasked to lead the line. It's a tough one with Betcher because, you could look at moments in both of the first matches that if he slots away his chances, how different does the match go? I mean, either of those could be completely different matches, of course, if he scores. So I think he probably gets 1 or 2 more matches, and if he fails to produce, then I think he's probably lost the starting role.
Yeah, DeMay referenced something like 6-7 games before you can really get a sense that it's not working, and offering these guys the opportunity, the consistency. That's a lot of games. We're sitting here after 2 weeks and we're already clamoring for a win. But the XG has been there for Betcher. I joke a lot about his XG per 90 being a borderline elite in Major League Soccer. But we've talked year over year about the striker's mentality as well. And it's always been in context of Klaus, but the same principles apply for Betcher. He is a striker. He thrives on scoring goals. His confidence comes from scoring goals. So whether it's getting in his own head with something that and not to say that he did get in his own head, but if that's an issue, the finish that he missed against San Diego, really the one key opportunity that we had created through Santos, Durkin, Miguel Perez, and then up to Simon Betcher, that whiff is just something that you got to feel takes the confidence down a notch at the least. The quality and where he's putting himself in the field last week was a complete byproduct of the failure of the system overall. The fact that San Diego was bettering us at every turn, a player like Betcher had no real opportunity to get in a groove and have multiple shots on goal, but he didn't convert the opportunity that he had. I agree. I don't think Betcher is at risk at this point of losing his spot, and especially losing it to Cordova, who's just arriving. This to me is a tailor-made opportunity to get Cordova minutes late in the game. The game state will matter on that one. If we're up by a few goals, maybe he gets thrown in there and we see if he can score a garbage time goal. If we're down some, or if we're drawn, I don't know if we're trying to get back into it. You could argue that he'd be a spark off the bench, but how comfortable would DeMay be inserting a player that has just 2 or 3 training sessions into a critical situation like that? That'll be something to follow. But overall, yes, I do think Betcher still has the job, and maybe for another couple of weeks. Again, the most difficult stretch of the MLS season we're in the middle of right now. I still buy into that. Between Charlotte, that was a playoff contender, still could be a playoff contender, hasn't had a good 2 weeks. But San Diego, Seattle, LAFC, that's the top of the West right there. And so you take that into account a little bit. The last storyline to follow is how different the St. Louis system, style, attack, and press will look with Marcel Hartel available now. Hartel returned to training on Thursday after missing last week due to personal reasons, anticipating the birth of his child, which we haven't heard an official word yet. So I'm not going to touch that subject until we have official word on that. But Hartel was back at training on Thursday. Here was Johan Demey talking about the impact that Hartel can have and the impact of City without Hartel.
Yeah, it's with every player you get something different. Like every profile is different. So again, like I'm very pleased with the collective structure and the collective understanding of what we're trying to do. Now it's more like decision making, execution. For sure, having Cello like changes a little bit the game, like in the final third in terms of what he can bring like on the ball. His understanding defensively is also like very, very good. So like he helps us like also out of possession in terms of the way he communicates, the way he organizes. But I'd say like on the ball is definitely one that can understand those moments, maybe where we need to retain a little bit more possession, moments where we need to attack a little bit quicker. So having someone like that back in the squad is definitely a big positive in terms of like controlling the tempo of the game and like dictating the play a little bit more with the ball.
Controlling the tempo of the play and dictating. Obvious benefits of Marcel Hartel. I struggle to overestimate just how important Hartel is to this team and to part of what happened last week. I completely attribute that to the absence of Marcel Hartel. And that's kind of what you want from your designated player. We always talk about signing a DP that can take over a game when needed. We just saw the absence of our best designated player, arguably, but our best designated player in my eyes, and we saw what happened. So, Stu, should we expect, regardless of the opponent, the City team to be executing what they need to much better with Marcel Hartel in the lineup?
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, I'll just flat out say he's our best player on the roster. With his absence, you're going to take a hit. And yeah, MLS, you pay big for your most talented players. You find a lot more success on the rest of how you build out your roster, but having a DP absence gonna be big. So Hartel being in the midfield, it's absolutely massive. Him being back and being at home, anything can happen in this league. Who knows how Seattle's going to execute their game plan? I know we'll talk about Seattle in a moment. But it's hopefully he's in a great mood. Being a first-time dad, I believe it's his first, right? Second. Okay, never mind.
You got the celebration.
Oh yeah, man.
He's gonna have to change that up. He's gonna have to change that up.
Yeah, I mean,
I hope to see a new one this weekend.
That would be absolutely amazing. After his brace, he pops out the new celebration. That would be fantastic.
We'll throw in an extra $10 to Catherine Cares if Marcel Hartel not only scores but we'll say an extra $10 if Hartel scores and an extra $5 if he debuts a new celebration. We want to put our money where our mouth is on this, on how exciting that would be. So hold us to that on that. Stu, I think we got to shift into Seattle. We'll circle back to St. Louis later on. It might end up on our second part, which I'm calling this week our final flight. Got a lot of feedback on the second part. We're early on in the season. We're trying to figure out how to name the second part of our show now that it's not the wind down anymore. It's not the wind down. We're looking at MLS After Dark, which was kind of not well received to me on a few instances. It's a little overused was the reason. Not that it's just bad in general, Flyover After Dark, but we're trying the final flight. So stay tuned for the final flight for some more questions that we have for St. Louis. Right now on the Big 550 KTRS, Flyover Footy, it's time to look at the Seattle Sounders. Seattle is tied for 9th in the West after 2 games, a win and a draw, +1 goal differential, 3 goals scored, 2 goals allowed. They had a 2-0 win against the Colorado Rapids on Matchday 1, and they had a 2-1 loss at Real Salt Lake away in Matchday 2. And the trends for Seattle are They had really good possession, really good field tilt against Colorado. They showed they had a patient buildup. They were open on both sides. And then in week 2, they continued dominating the field tilt, 64-36 against RSL. They made more passes in the final third, 35-26. They had more passes in the final third, 96-55. And they forced Kevin Cabral to make 8 saves, but they lost 2-1. They led in shot attempts, shots on goal, corners of possession at half. They trailed 1-0 going into half. So this was basically what I looked at as like it called a stat sheet win and a real life loss. So Stu, the past couple of weeks for Seattle, you discount the RSL game because Seattle just can't seem to win against Real Salt Lake. It's been 15 years, 16 matches, I think, 15 years since Seattle has won in Sandy, Utah against Real Salt Lake. So whatever curse exists could be to blame for that, knowing how much they dominated. But this does seem to be a pretty consistent and pretty recognizable Seattle team from what we've seen in years past, right?
Yeah, I mean, Seattle in general, it's amazing what Schmetzer's done with his just keeping these same guys and squad consistency and rotating out pieces, but keeping a lot of the same core. I mean, Christian Roldan, Alex Roldan, Rusnak, Vargas is gone now, I guess, but they replace him and slot in, Jesus Ferreira.
Mm-hmm.
So Nuhu, yeah, anyways, we'll get into their names, but it's those, especially that field tilt number is a little worrisome to me, considering the state of our back line. But if there's a keeper that's going to step up and match Kevin Cabral's 8 saves, I think Roman Berkey can do it. It's, can we score that first goal to kind of punch them in the mouth, as it were, to maybe come out with 3 points on this one?
But that's probably one of the biggest keys. And you always want to score first. But in a game like this, where both teams, you could argue, are very similar in what they're trying to do and what they're trying to implement as their end goal of their product, their style, to take one team out of that flow early could be extremely vital, and something St. Louis needs to do at home to help them. Seattle is suffering from injuries. We're not alone in the injury woe department. Seattle is, at least as of last week, and who we expect to miss this week, Pedro de la Vega. He had a fractured kneecap from October. They're not expecting him back until around spring or the World Cup break. He's a young designated player for them, and he's just missed a ton of time, but he's got so much promise and excitement when he does take the field. They're missing a backup center back in Stuart Hawkins. Last week was out with a quad. Ryan Saylor, a backup center back, also with a knee injury. Kim Ki-hee with calf injury. He's a depth piece for them. But a couple of their key players that they either are missing or may be missing, besides Pedro de la Vega, Jordan Morris is expected to be out. He had a quad injury that he suffered around 8 minutes of the opener. He's their starting left winger. And we found out today on Thursday that Paul Rothrock missed training on Thursday. So Rothrock, watching the player availability report as it comes out will be interesting on Rothrock, because if Morris misses time, Rothrock is that next man up on the left. And even more so on the left especially, but generally in their attack, Georgie Minuhu missed last week. He's a winger depth. They run a 4-2-3-1, so he's one of their wingers, winger depth. And Nico Moreno, our friend from Sounder at Heart, noticed that Georgie was a full participant in training on Thursday, but Brian Schmetzer noted that he has a small fracture on the bottom of his right foot, and his availability will depend on pain tolerance. So Georgie starts in place of Jordan Morris. I would say doubtful that he's able to go the full 90 if pain tolerance from a bone fracture on the bottom of his right foot is in play. And then if you're missing Georgie Minuhu, then that's an extra bit down. The silver lining for Seattle is Paul Arriola, one of their biggest internal signings in Major League Soccer. Arriola, former men's national team player out wide, said he's absolutely fit enough to start if he's called upon. Arriola himself returning from injury last season. Stu, who is the most critical piece that Seattle may be missing going into this game, and why?
I mean, you said he's coming back to, or he missed some of training. He's a bit of a cult hero and a local guy, and signed a big contract with them, free agent contract with them in the offseason. But Paulie Rothrock, I absolutely love watching him play. He's a lot of fun. He was very involved, I think, in what was that, the 4-1 loss we had against them? Was that last year or the year before?
Yeah, last year he hurt us.
Yeah, him and Danny Musowski were just kind of fun in a kind of terrible way. It's horrible when it happens against you, but it's fun watching them play just in general as a neutral. So yeah, Rothrock would be mine if he's out. But I don't know. We'll see. That's a biased answer, not necessarily a tactical approach one.
And Rothrock re-signed with Seattle, and he's one of the many. So Seattle has the biggest roster returning from last season, and Paul Rothrock, 27-year-old, he has developed from a next pro player with Toronto up into Seattle, and he's kind of a locked and loaded starter, especially with an outage like Jordan Morris. He is that exciting player. He's got the style, he's got the flair, and he's willing to just get in the weeds, down and dirty, and do whatever it takes to help his team score. He's the kind of player that you just rally behind. So if he's out, that is going to be a big loss for them. Other Seattle storylines that I'm following into this one are that like I mentioned, Seattle has returned all but 2 players who have played at least 710 minutes last year, Obed Vargas and our old friend John Bell. They have the deepest roster continuity in all of Major League Soccer, and they've added a dimension to their game this year, the press, which they have worked well. It's not a full change, but it's a more of a shifting press, and they've added that to their play style, and they've become more dangerous in being able to control the field tilt by leveraging a press a little higher up the field. The problem for Seattle is travel. Seattle's in the midst of a 6-game road trip in MLS play, while Lumen Field undergoes upgrades. They are returning home, quote unquote, for a midweek CONCACAF Champions Cup game. So they'll have a match at home, but as far as MLS play, they've got 6 straight road games. We are their second. And it's because Lumen Field is undergoing World Cup upgrades. I saw they're installing grass. So the idea of 5 straight total and 6 straight in MLS on the road is a difficult stretch for any team. On the other side of that, they have stretches of 3 straight home matches. And so those will, you don't want to run into Seattle then. I think that this is a little better time to run into them with the injuries that they have, the road travel that they're undergoing. It's Salt Lake last week, St. Louis this week, then up to Vancouver, San Jose, Minnesota, and Houston with a midweek CONCACAF Champions Cup home match at Spokane Stadium on March 18th. Stu, we are running out of time on the big 550 KTRS. So let's say I'm going to save the deep dive into Seattle for our final flight. We'll hit that right off the bat, as well as some questions for Seattle. I want to go straight into our starting 11 predictions and discussions, because I think there are some questions going into this for St. Louis. Leading into that, I want to get Yohan Deme's comments when I asked him about Sangbin Jeong and the right midfield or right 10 position and his approach to that, because this will play into, I think, how you view the starting 11 and Sangbin and overall what Deme is looking to get out of that right 10 role.
Different players with different profile, like again having an understanding of like the profile of the players, and that's why like our animation a little bit on the right side and on the left side is a little bit different in terms of what we're asking those guys in those positions to do. So I don't want to go into too much details about like what we're asking those guys, but I like players that have different profiles. So yes, we could have 2 number 10 that are good on the ball, that can really link up like on build up. But having a different profile like Sangi is also interesting for us because we can ask different things from him. So again, I don't want to categorize like that position into something. I think having a mix right now, we've got different guys that can play there, whether it's like Cello, Sangi, Sedi, Makai could play there. You saw Celio in San Diego as well. So we've got different profile that can play there. It's more a matter of like what are the basics that we need to get right in those positions when it comes to the build-up, like, and what position do those guys need to take to really help us out, like when we're building the attack. And then after, when it's a matter of the final third, guys have different qualities. We know that Sangi is more someone that is going to stretch the back line, that is going to make runs in behind, but that can be also very efficient in the final third. So having that understanding helps me and helps us as a staff also create like the organization around them to be efficient.
There are almost no certainties that he gave us in that, but it offers an insight into why he values certain players in that in that role, because that's kind of the one that's up for grabs. I feel after 2 match weeks, we haven't seen what we needed to see for Sangbin. And we know Toyshirt is a different profile kind of a player. Salio, I would argue, is more similar to Sangbin in the speed and the ability to get in behind the lines. At Salio, we saw take one of the attacking 10 roles last week with Marcel Hartel out. So Demay's approach could be based more on the game state, what he sees out of Seattle as a benefit in what we need to happen. Stu, do you want to start me off with your projected starting 11 going into Seattle?
Yeah, and that's the spot in the lineup that I've been waffling back and forth on. So I'll go with Berkey, Polvera, Baumgartel, and Orozco center backs. Santos as the left wing back, simply because he's really the option right now with Totland out. Durkin, Edelman in the middle, Wallem on the right wing back, Hartel, Teukert, and Becker as our attacking options. So I'll go with Teukert, but I could easily see, we were talking before we started just about how the center back pairing for Seattle, assuming it's going to be Jackson Reagan and Yamar, aren't the quickest center back pairing. So there's a possibility that someone who profiles with a little higher pace, like Sangbin, might be able to get in behind or better even. So, but I'm going to go with Teukert.
That's such an interesting observation, because knowing how Seattle's pressing in St. Louis, if we're able to hit on the counter, hit in transition a little bit, catching Seattle high, maybe we don't return possession of the ball immediately after some, and we absorb pressure a little bit, keeping a tighter formation around the middle of the field. And then we're able to extend past those center backs who are slower. And Seattle has been operating in a 4-2-3-1 this season. They've not used wing backs. So leveraging some of these fullbacks, Nuhu and Alex Roldan in that way could be interesting. On my side, I see 2 primary areas that are of question. And so our projected lineup when we put it out on Saturday is going to be interesting. Berkey is locked and loaded. I think Polvera and Baumgartel are pretty locked and loaded. Orozco is a question for me because of Mbake. I don't know if he's able to slot right into the starting 11. I do think it will be his job eventually. Mbake is going to be a starter. He's going to get his opportunity, but will it be this week already? Or will we see him in a cameo role, second half sub first? Because of our wing back depth, that plays into this. So we have, I've got Orozco in my 11 right now. I've got Polvera, Baumgartel, Orozco. I've got Santos, Durkin, Edelman, and Wallem as my midfield, with Santos left wing back, Wallem right wing back. I got Marcel Hartel, Sangbin Zhang, and Simon Becher. So I've got a pretty consistent 11 with Hartel plugged back into that roster from week 2 and the exact same 11 from week 1. What I will say is on the wing back side, I think we're going to start with Orozco, because it wouldn't surprise me if when either Santos or Wallem need to sub out, if they do, Santos most notably, maybe we slot Orozco out wide as a wing back. And then the sub is at that point, maybe Santos for Mbake, and Mbake slides in at center back. And so you get Mbake active, involved, but it's not throwing him into a start right off the bat. That to me is a more likely scenario. And then the opposite end of the field with Sangbin, it's matchup based. And Stu, you're kind of selling me in Sangbin, and at least the idea of how Demay was describing, the different profiles and knowing you can take advantage of certain players' characteristics. Seattle seems primed for a player who can stretch the field a little bit, especially when you have Marcel Hartel back in the game. If we didn't have Marcel Hartel back this week, I would say we probably need Cedric Toyshirt to help progress the ball, help get in as the 10. And maybe because we expect him to play at least 45 in this game, or be capable of playing at least 45 now after progressing from the first 2, you have that opportunity underneath. With Hartel back, it changes the whole game. And I think that opens up for Sangbin. You see if you can actually get him to right the ship against this Seattle team, because he didn't do it in week 1 and he didn't do it in week 2. So the clock is ticking for him more so than anybody else, knowing that we have Toyshirt. We even have Cordova, who you could argue could play that position as a second striker, especially when we press with 2 strikers. That would be an interesting look. A lot of options are starting to present themselves. Even though we have the Totland injury, the emergence of Mbake and Cordova Falou Fall on the horizon. So for this game against Seattle, Mbake and Cordova are kind of the X factors on how much will they play, and will Mbake at least start in this game. That could start to throw a few of these maneuverings into chaos, but this game will be really fascinating to see because of that, and it gives us an idea of how to judge what Demay's priorities are, why and when he makes certain subs from his starting 11, and when he's actually going to be starting to tinker with it, because so far we haven't been seeing a tinkering in the starting 11. Stu, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it's safe to say this is the last stable starting 11, relatively predictable one for a little bit, with so many more X factors or mystery boxes coming in the next few weeks.
Performance is going to start to drive things for sure. The introduction of Cordova, the emergence of Mbake, the health of Falou Fall, you're going to start to see form matter much more so than fitness. And that's a good problem to have. So be on the lookout for who separates himself in this game, because that'll give us maybe an indication of the starting 11 going forward. Stu, scoreline prediction for this one before we get out of here.
I'm going to say 2-1. I'll say this time Betcher does bury his early chance, and we kind of take advantage, and we're able to kind of pull a similar story to what RSL did last week, where they went up 2-0 and then gave one up.
I could go with that. I really want a clean sheet from Berkey, but I'll take the 3 points no matter how they come. I will stick with that as well. 2-1. I almost went 3-1. But I think the home crowd is going to push St. Louis over the top. We're going to come out looking much better. The injuries to Seattle are going to be a factor. And I think if we can be more successful on our wings, we're going to have a good time. And ultimately, it's going to be a good time on Saturday night anyway. You have the 3x5 flag giveaway as the gift giveaway when you enter the stadium. So show up early for that. Enjoy the match, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Flyover Footy. My name is Matt Baker for Stuart Holkren. Enjoy the game. And as always, go City.
Go City.
And that's the KTRS portion. Boy, we didn't get to like half the notes on that one, Stu. Do you got to bounce, or are you sticking around for a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to bounce
All right.
Early morning. But yeah, it'll be an exciting one on Saturday.
Absolutely. Take it easy, buddy. Talk to you later. And I am going to go grab a delicious Blue Jay to open up the final flight. Be right back, folks. All right. That's too big. There we go. Let's dive in. We're going to hit the final flight. That's the new one we're trying out. So drop me a line if you like that or not. The mix with flyover with beer, all that good stuff. All right, let's do this. Welcome into the final flight. Let us know if you like that name. If you're listening to this on the audios, it was chatting a little bit in between. We'll see how that works. For this final flight, my final flight is all about a little birdie from Blue Jay Brewing, our brewery partner for 2026. We hope to be back with them at some point in the future. There are plans, tentative plans for this season, and if you've paid attention to the structure of this season with World Cup break, you might have an idea of what we're planning with Blue Jay. But nothing's official yet. So what I want to do to begin this final flight is let's look first and foremost at Seattle. There are two big things I didn't get to in the first portion of Flyover Footy about this matchup this weekend. So before we talk anything else, I want to give a little bit more information into Seattle, go a little deeper under the hood for the Seattle Sounders. To do that, I want to have my final video for Yoann Demay talking about Seattle after I asked him about how this matchup might align similarly to the San Diego match, most notably. So we talked earlier how Seattle and San Diego have somewhat similar styles or they have similarities to them. And so I asked Demay about that and how it helps them prepare for Seattle.
There is some similarities, 100%. Like I agree. I think that's why when I spoke about like having a shorter week, like we've got some foundation about like what we've seen in the past, like we were in preseason or in the game, like in San Diego. It's just again having an understanding, like when you play through that press, like understanding when to keep accelerating on, or when you need to keep the ball like higher up on the pitch. You know, like against team that press you, like it feels like it's hard to break the press, but when you break, it feels like there's tons of spaces, and that's when players get like excited or get carried away into like attacking too quick. So I think like last week was a good answer, like a good like situation for us to learn that when we break that press and we can force them to defend like a little bit backward and more in their half, like spaces are gonna open up a little bit more for us. So that's what we're expecting to do like this weekend. Hopefully, like we can be able to play through it and then to get set up like a little bit higher up, which will give us like more time to organize and to find the right spaces to attack.
Setting up higher up is going to be an interesting battle because with Seattle, they typically run a 4-2-3-1, like we talked about earlier. In possession, they often ship to like a 2-3 shape. They have Alex Roldan, their right back, tucking into midfield a little bit, giving Nuhu, their left back, some opportunity to advance. In attack, it might look more like a 3-4-2-1, which our buddies over at Sounder at Heart have noted becomes a little more common when you have somebody like Paul Rothrock or when you have Rothrock or Areola occupy the left wing as opposed to somebody like Jordan Morris. So we might see that a little bit, especially if Paul Areola ends up being the one who plays if all of Morris, Manuhu, and Rothrock are out. If that's the case, then you might see a little bit more of a willingness to have that left side be a little more attacking on the wing versus tucking inside. Where Seattle comes in at 2026 is a very familiar Seattle. They operate in large parts between their progression, their wide attack, like they did in 2025. But this year's Seattle team has been described more as patient progression, attacking from the wings, organized possession, and high pressing. The pressing is kind of a new characteristic this year. It has been prevalent in their first two games, and so I'm pretty comfortable saying that's something to watch out for is how they press us and how, to Demay's comments, how St. Louis can gain that possession-based attack into the attacking half and final third, playing through Seattle's press. So we're going to have to show for a second week in a row that we can beat a press. This is where Marcel Hartel, to me, comes in the most handy. His ability to come back if need be, his ability to be on the ball, and his decision-making is just so elite for what St. Louis City has to offer. I think this is the thing that is going to be St. Louis's X factor in beating a Seattle press. And then Hartel's going to rely on his wingers. Rafael Santos primarily. He's going to rely on Chris Durkin to help him play off of that and to progress the ball, opening up space. If the ball can reach Marcel Hartel, good things will happen. The problem would be last week, for instance, you had the buildup that led to the goal was an errant pass from Chris Durkin to Miguel Perez. And when Perez was dispossessed, Durkin and Edelman both collapsed and tried to recover the ball. It was played behind them, and the goal was scored. In this case, if Durkin's pass can get to Marcel Hartel, or Hartel does a better job of opening himself up off the ball, that problem's solved. And so the high press that Seattle has, which is kind of new this year, Brian Schmetzer has stated that this is a tactical evolution for his club. That becomes that much more important to have a player like Hartel come back a little bit, not as deep as a 6, but come back in that box-to-box characteristic and try to help progress it. We need that quality and that skill. Some of the patient progression that we talked about, Seattle ranked in the 77th percentile last year in their middle and final third passes. They were far heads and tails away from winning field tilt most every match and then completing those passes in that final third area. Their buildup is central and deliberate when they do this, if they're able to get it from their wings centrally into that final third. And then oftentimes, at least with Jordan Morris, they'll kick it out and have him invert in. Not having Jordan Morris will be an interesting look, like I said, at Paul Rothrock if he's able to go. And if not, we see maybe a Paul Areola sighting out wide. The Seattle has a lot of quality players, not just for their wide attack, not just their possession, not just their press, but they're top to bottom a pretty stacked team, and they're a very consistent team. I mentioned earlier they've returned all but 2 players that played at least 710 minutes. And 710 minutes is not that high of a benchmark here, be over 34 games. So you look at it starts at the top in their number 10 role, their attacking midfielder, Albert Rusnak. He's a Slovakian designated player, and he is who their attack operates through. They're successful as a team in building this, but Rusnak is the most dangerous one to keep an eye on. 14 goals, 12 assists last year. In week 1 against Colorado, he scored in the 15th minute, 37th goal in all competitions since joining Seattle. Week 2, he had 2 shots on target against Cabral, forcing him to make saves and creating free kick opportunities. So Albert Rusnak is the player to mark if you're going to pick any player to mark in the final third. How he operates, which is centrally, will be different than what an Anders Dreyer was doing last week against San Diego. So whether it is a defensive midfielder that has more of a responsibility for Rusnak, like a Daniel Edelman, that's going to be a matchup to watch. Edelman v. Rusnak. It will do 2 things. It will ensure that we have somebody marking Rusnak, but it will make sure that Edelman doesn't get, I think, too ambitious in moving up, which we've seen a little bit. And he might need to be, and it could help progress the ball as well if we were able to play it out of the back after a turnover. So keeping Edelman or Durkin, one or the other, a little deeper to help battle Rusnak, but also to help connect balls in short succession once we recover the ball in our defensive third will be important as well. In addition to Rusnak, and we're trying to focus on only the players that we expect to play, so I'm not going to cover Jordan Morris here. Christian Roldan is central midfielder, captain, 12-year Sounders veteran. He scored his first goal of the season against RSL, header from the back post after Rusnak created that corner. He is the anchor of their double pivot. He is one of the best central defensive midfielders. He's disciplined. He can help them progress the ball in possession, and he's just a veteran of the league. 12 years with Seattle, knows Brian Schmetzer, knows what he wants, is the perfect leader, Christian Roldan, in this organization. And he's a men's national team candidate for the World Cup this summer under Mauricio Pochettino. So he's a name to watch, not just in this game, but successful next couple of months for Christian Roldan could lead directly to an opportunity in the World Cup. Hassani Dotson is the other central midfielder. He is the newcomer of the entire team. He's the newbie to watch. He had a rough match against RSL. Sounder at Heart notes he had some poor choice passing at the edge of their box that basically were quick turnovers. It triggered RSL's counterattack more often than not. He took a knock in week 1, subbed out at half, but he came back. Minnesota United knows him well. He played for them before. The integration into Seattle is new. He's still learning the structure. He's basically the only player that we're looking at that's learning the team. But at the same time, he has the talent. He has the skills. It's just, can we exploit his newness to this system and make him make some of the same mistakes that we saw St. Louis make in weeks 1 and 2 under Johan Demey as they were learning that system. Osaze de Rosario, a guy who's on my fantasy soccer team. He's the striker. He's the number 9. He's the breakout player. Backheeled had said he's ready to make a massive leap at the number 9 this season. Finished preseason with a team best 5 goals. He scored in week 1 as well. He was subbed off against RSL in the 58th minute, which means he could be good to go the full 90. That's something to watch out for. And De Rosario is a name that's mentioned on Backheeled and American Soccer Analysis as the player to watch. Like I said, Backheeled called him the breakout candidate for Seattle. I'm just going to read from the Backheeled article. He had a wild professional career path that featured an untimely trip to Ukraine, ended up in the Sounders setup as a reclamation project, and was downright dominant in limited minutes last year. Scored 4 goals in the 283 minutes during Seattle's Leagues Cup run in 2025. Physically imposing, off the ball smarts. De Rosario has barely played any first division minutes before this year, so he's young in that sense, but he might unseat both Danny Musovski that Stu mentioned earlier, as well as Jordan Morris for a starting role, starting primary attacker position. And De Rosario is only 24 years old. The potential with De Rosario is huge. Can St. Louis stymie him? Paul Rothrock, Jesus Ferreira, a couple other names that we mentioned earlier. Rothrock, if he plays, because he missed training on Thursday, if he plays, he is that spark plug. We talked about his fan favorite antics. He's willing to get dirty. He's good out wide, and he would start in place of Jordan Morris. He's great on the press, and he's basically exactly what Brian Schmetzer likes on a winger: active, energetic, and dangerous. Jesus Ferreira is a name that a lot of people are familiar with. The production in 2025 was fairly limited in all things considered from what Ferreira was capable of. 5 goals and 13 assists sounds really good when you're comparing it to a St. Louis City player in that role. But week 1, he had some key passes. Week 2, he was subbed off in the 58th minute with De Rosario. So the production hasn't been there yet in the first couple of games. Ferreira is likely to take on a larger role by necessity if all of Jordan Morris, Paul Rothrock, and Georgie Manuhu is absent as well. So be watching out for Jesus Ferreira. And then Paul Arriola, back from his ACL. He says he's fully fit, ready to go. Either way, Paul Arriola is an absolute danger to watch out for. High profile that fits this system perfectly, as he showed last season. Their projected starting 11 that I have is Andrew Thomas at goalkeeper, which is an interesting story. Stefan Fry has been usurped in the goalkeeper position. Andrew Thomas is described by Brian Schmetzer as the hardest decision of his career in starting him over Stefan Fry because of what Fry has meant to the Sounders club. The 4 saves and a week 1 clean sheet against Colorado was a fantastic season debut for Andrew Thomas. And he wasn't really tested in the Utah loss. It was just the defensive structure in front of him broke down by and large on some of these counterattack opportunities. So in set rest defenses, Thomas hasn't been really tested since Colorado. So looking at, let's flip a little bit and look at St. Louis as some questions that I had for St. Louis that we didn't get to on the first part of the show. This is my second drink, is looking at St. Louis. Will Dante Polvera have a better week than last week? This is a kind of a cop-out question because we addressed it in our storylines, but between the evolution in his positioning, his timing, his chances taken, and spacing, will Dante Polvera have a better show against the Seattle team that has more danger on their left and centrally than it does on their right, which is a change from last week? The bigger question from an attacking perspective is, will our wing backs return to form? We know Thomas Totland's going to be out, so the wingback depth is a concern right off the bat. This puts a lot of pressure on Rafael Santos. Conrad Wallem, we saw him go the full 90. We know what he's capable of consistently match over match, but we don't know that yet of Rafael Santos. He had a good first game. He had a subpar second game, subbed out at half. So will Santos find more success in helping St. Louis build when he has Marcel Hartel on his side of the field? That's another big point in favor of Rafael Santos, is the quality around him that can both draw pressure away from him, open him up a little bit, but he will be able to help progress the ball much better if he has a player of the quality of Marcel Hartel that can stretch the field around him and give him an outlet to play off of versus being more on an island or having to tuck in to find others and not stretch out wide like we saw in week 1. Can St. Louis find a good balance between successful wing-back build and being defensively sound in the wide areas against Seattle? Talked about how Seattle likes to build on the wide areas. St. Louis has to find some kind of a balance because Rafael Santos and Dante Polvera on the left side was an abject failure last week. One of the best players, right attacking mids, right winger in Anders Dreyer torched us. And we can't have that happen again. So this is a question. Can we shore up that left side defense? And it starts from our wing back, but it stretches back into our center back. Will we have a central midfielder help in that a little more consistently? Will we have discipline to stay deeper and help provide numbers for a Seattle team that has a desire to high press? So you're going to need to help progress and beat that press. I don't expect St. Louis to play it over the top because that's not what they've been doing under Yoann Demay. But when we are against the ball, transition or otherwise, are we going to start from a position of numerical advantage deeper in the field, or are we going to remain as willing to press both central midfielders up to recover a ball and open up that space in front of our center backs? Have to do better in it, no matter what the end strategy is going to be. Will Simon Betcher cement his role as a team starting 9, or will he leave the door open to a possibly debuting Cordova? The bigger question to me is, could we see both? Because we talked about Betcher v. Cordova earlier in the strategy, but how does this play to some of the players Demay's been utilizing? Is this going to see inherently Brendan McSorley take on a lesser role, Or will Brendan McSorley become an option underneath at that right mid, right 10 position that we've seen him sub into before in preseason and early this year? How the depth chart plays out is going to be something that's a big question for me on this one. What are the second half choices that Yoann Damet is going to make? If he starts anything similar to what Stu and I thought he's going to start, he's going to have more options. He's going to have a Salio, a Toyshirt, a McSorley, a Cordova, all in the attack. I would assume that Marcel Hartel is still good to go 90. He is one of those machines who never breaks down, and he had 49 straight starts in all competitions of the matches that he was featuring in. The only match that he actually didn't even dress for was an Open Cup match against Union Omaha, but 49 straight starts, healthy nonstop since he appeared for St. Louis in August 2024. I think he's good to go 90. And if he goes 90, then you've got that depth chart conversation. If you start Betcher and Sangbin, does Cordova or McSorley come in at striker? Does Toyshirt, Joyner, or Salio come in underneath? And at what point? You assume that if there's any player, and we talked about this last year, that the front office usually stays out of tactical decisions. But if there's any player at this point that both the front office and I would say the head coach need to see sooner rather than later, it's Sergio Cordova. The man has 12 total games left available to him on loan. And yeah, he hasn't debuted yet. He's on loan through the first half of the season through June 30th. And we only have 12 more games left until then. So he has to prove himself in order to win a contract or be purchased by St. Louis. He's on a DP. He's a DP by designation right now. But if we pick up his option, he should not be a DP, won't be a DP. That's why we're doing this now while he's on loan. But that just adds to the importance of seeing what he has to offer, getting him in as quickly as possible, allowing him to showcase himself, and just giving us real live game data of what we can expect from Sergio Cordova. If he doesn't get into this, then it's down to 11, then 10. And, you don't expect him to immediately take over the spot for Betcher. I expect it to be a battle pretty consistently from here on out. But that adds to the depth chart conversation of, will Cordova play alongside Betcher? Maybe we start Cordova underneath a 9.5, if you will, and we look more like a 3-4-1-2 at some point in the near future. But you got to get Cordova out there sooner rather than later. And I do think this is going to be detrimental to Brendan McSorley's minutes, first and foremost. I don't expect to see McSorley utilized as much, especially because Toyshirt is also on the rise. If Toyshirt can make a longer appearance, 45 minutes or so, and it's at Sangbin's spot at that right 10, that's just an extra notch down for guys like McSorley and Joyner, and kind of like Salio as well. So how this shakes out, who we see subbed in, big stories to follow, big questions that are outstanding as we get more and more players healthy and available in the attack. Marcel Hartel returning is a question on how much more effective St. Louis will be. We talked about that earlier, so I don't need to go in depth, but that's my go home question of St. Louis is Marcel Hartel and how effective St. Louis can be with him back in the lineup. I think that does it for my look at Seattle and St. Louis. The only other big thing that I really wanted to spend time on with this episode of Flyover Footy is shout out to City 2. Last week, we didn't cover City 2 on last episode for Fallout because, well, they had just played on a Saturday. We did the Fallout on Monday, so it was focused on City. But credit to City 2, who downed Sporting KC2 4-0 in David Critchley's return to the sidelines for City 2 in their inaugural 2026 game. It was a match that was very bizarre to start. And we send out our thoughts and prayers on Flyover to Owen Jorgensen, who had I understand it to be a pretty serious wrist injury, but it was a pretty dangerous looking incident there just 3 minutes into the match. Owen Jorgensen is at this point a rising star in the City Academy. He's made boys national team appearances, I think up to the U15 level at this point. This was his first professional appearance. He only lasted 3 minutes before he was subbed out for Evan Carlock. And Jorgensen is just a rising star on the team, in the organization, at the academy. He was an MLS Next All-Star last year, and we hope to see him back soon because this seems like an injury that could keep him out for quite some time. But a wrist injury, if that's really what it was, then we are thankful that it wasn't a leg injury. and able to come back quicker, maybe wearing a brace or a cast or whatever that looks like. But the ironic thing is the first goal scored 14 minutes was by Evan Carlock. So Evan Carlock, the sub for Owen Jorgensen, started the scoring output at 14 minutes, opened the account for St. Louis City. And it was just 20 minutes later that Patrick McDonald scored a goal from Riley Lynch, who had himself an absolute banger of a game on that right side. Noteworthy that City 2 came out in a 3-4-2-1 kind of a formation that mirrored what City had been doing. So this in and of itself, I'll stop it at 2-0 right there, because that's how we went into halftime. 2-0 St. Louis, City 2. This City 2 definitely seemed like they were trying to build more through the wings. Riley Lynch had himself a fantastic game on that right wing back side. He was getting all kinds of final third entries. The assist that he had was just a beauty there, taking it all the way to the touchline and then dumping it back to Patrick McDonald. Love to see that kind of build, and love to see that Critchley was able to do that with his players. He talked so much last year, David Critchley, about the identity of St. Louis being the pressing style, being the direct to goal. And this to me isn't Critchley having to adjust his preferred style. This speaks more, I think, to David Critchley, his capability of coaching the style that the organization wants him to coach. He's a chameleon in this way so far. He may have a preferred style that if he gets a job at the MLS level and he interviews, it could be because he's really good at implementing a preferred style of his own. You know, I think he's young enough as a head coach that he still can be developing his own preferred style of how he thinks he gets the most out of his players. But if we continue to see this from City 2 under David Critchley, he's going to be making himself a name as a head coach capable of implementing multiple strategies and being a locker room guy from last season. I can't be more excited about David Critchley and what he was able to do with this group of players, who, as a reminder, is a new look City 2. Riley Lynch, that I was just talking about, is the oldest, one of the three 23-year-olds. I think Patrick McDonald was actually one of the other 23-year-olds on the team. Everybody else is younger. We're talking teenagers from the academy. I think there were 13, I want to say, academy grads or former academy players out of the 23 rostered. I mean, it's a significant amount. And then you supplement that with super draft picks, Cooper Forcellini, with Zach Lillington. Sorry, brain fart. But then you have trialist Palmer Alt. He's also on the team. And then you see later on in the game, guys like Eddie Niles make his appearance, and Chidube Nwonko, academy players who have some significant potential in front of them. Awesome to see them get an opportunity. Before they subbed in, we saw a goal from a City player. Kyle Hebert made a start in this matchup, and he had an assist as a kind of a cleanup goal 53 minutes into this one from Cooper Forcellini. That was awesome to see Kyle Hebert get a chance to do that, being left behind to play on Saturday against SKCII when City was traveling to San Diego. And then at 74, you had Cooper Forcellini finish it off. A 74th minute goal from Palmer Alt. City 2 dominated front to back on this one. The stat line was pretty impressive. They had 19 shots to SKCII's 6, 9 shots on goal to SKCII's 3, and they had over 480 total passes. This is a team that was very mindful to take care of the ball, and they did it well. They won the passing accuracy as well. Good things all over the board from City 2, making a name for themselves in this season of potential change. So excitement abounds for City 2. The only other big noteworthy thing that I think I saw this week, and I may have missed something, and so I will correct that on Fallout if I do, but the Leagues Cup was announced. This is, Major League Soccer. It has an impact to MLS, and so figured might as well talk about some of the dates to know about Leagues Cup as you're looking ahead to this season. St. Louis is not in it. St. Louis is in the Open Cup. So more information to come about the U.S. Open Cup. I promise you we will be doing our typical flyover coverage of the Open Cup. Leagues Cup is still going to be that MLS via Liga MX. There's going to be 36 clubs in this one, all 18 Liga MX teams, 18 qualified MLS teams. They will be competing from August 4th to September 6th. So if you think about MLS, the season returning in late July, right before the World Cup ends, you've got Leagues Cup that's going to start on August 4th. It's available on Apple TV. It'll be more soccer to watch. We'll say that. I'm burying it this late in flyover because we're not in it, and there's not that vested interest in this. It's just a tournament that will be running from August 4th until September 6th, the final. They've got a phase 1, they've got quarterfinals, semifinals, third place. It's a tournament structure, and matches will be played in Mexico this year, as my understanding, for the first time in Leagues Cup history. So that'll be interesting to see unfold. But Leagues Cup will be piggybacking off the World Cup. So how the hype will be to be determined. Will there be, I don't want to say burnout on that necessarily. Also, how Apple TV covers it and touts it. That'll be interesting. Personally, I'll be more interested in the Open Cup throughout this season, and it will be mostly on CBS Golazo Network, on Paramount Plus. And of course, we cheer on in the Open Cup, Boffs, who has qualified as an amateur side, will be competing in the US Open Cup. And we have information on that on our Instagram and put it out on social media as far as their matches over at Lindenwood. And I believe they are free, but I'll need to correct myself on that if they're not. Excited to see another St. Louis side in the US Open Cup. City versus Boffs would be amazing later on in the Open Cup to have a St. Louis derby proper in the US Open Cup. Could be fantastic. But that's it for me on Flyover Footy. Appreciate everybody jumping in on the chat. I didn't have as much time tonight to look into this. I didn't have as much prep time on the show as I wanted, so apologies for that. But really quick, I do like to run through the chat and see what you guys have been talking about to see what our listeners can take from this. We do like the final round a little bit, so that might be keeping an appearance going forward. We have some love for Daniel Edelman in the chat. Really like that. Rusnak is a small guy. City needs to be physical with him. I can dig that, Chris. City needs to be physical with anybody, except for when you get a Chris Durkin picking up an early yellow card that's borderline at best, but it causes him to be a little more cautious later on in the game. Physical, but smart. How about we say that? Daniel Edelman has a physical presence in him. Again, physical, but smart. I want that good juxtaposition to happen. Paul Arriola used to be really good with Dallas. Paul Arriola had a significant injury last season. How he will be post-injury, post-ACL surgery has yet to be determined. That's going to be something to watch to see if he's lost a step, for instance, since then. All right. The only other question and comment is surprised to see Miguel Perez over Mekhi Joyner. I was too. And Yohan DeMay commented more on the positive aspect of Miguel Perez and his growth and development, and almost matchup based. What he thought that Miguel Perez would be able to offer in that little more advanced role versus what Mekhi Joyner offers. It almost seemed like it was, without saying it, defensive in nature, in trying to shore up the totality of our midfield. It didn't work, but who knows what would have happened if Mekhi Joyner had been in the game. I don't think Mekhi Joyner would have been a ball progressing 10 as we needed him to. I don't think his game yet is to that point. Definitely not to the level of Marcel Hartel. But Mekhi Joyner's absence over the first couple games is fascinating. I joked before the season, Mekhi Joyner playing the 10. That was a scarf thing we did. And Mekhi Joyner hasn't been playing the 10. He hasn't been playing much of anything. So we wonder now, with the introduction of Cordova, with the emergence of Cedric Toyshirt, all the things we talked about, what does it mean for the playing time of our young guys? And are we blocking them in a way in our search for increased quality versus giving them a chance to have a run out? Things we're just going to have to watch unfold. I don't have any answers because we haven't seen some of those new guys, mostly Sergio Cordova, or we haven't seen them have significant minutes, any minutes, to the point where we're able to judge, are we bringing in guys that are now blocking a Mekhi Joyner? Or what can we do to open up the field for him? Or Miguel Perez is going to get more time to play, I think, because the absence of Edu Leuven, the injury to Tomas Ostrak, that's not as big of an issue, but playing the kids is something to watch out for as we bring on these new players and have some return to form. And I'll end it on that. Enjoy the game this weekend. Have a great time if you're going to the game. If you're watching it on Apple TV, enjoy watching. Hopefully the announcers are good. For Stuart Holgren on Flyover Footy, my name is Matt Baker. Thank you so much for joining us on the live stream, watching later, listening later. However you're taking in Flyover, we really appreciate it. And we'll be back. Santi and I will be back on Sunday for a fallout to St. Louis, Seattle, and much more later on from Flyover Footy. Enjoy the weekend, everyone, and we'll talk to you later.